Welcome to episode 13. This one was a very special one with my good friend Jeff Dallin. Jeff is a father, he's a brother, he's a son, he's a business owner, he's a integration coach, and we had an amazing conversation about business, parenting, and psychedelics and his journey with them and what he's doing right now and where he hopes to go. And it's just an amazing conversation. This is one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. And I'm really looking forward to you guys hearing this one. Welcome, Mr. Jeff. How are you?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to have you on. I first met you pretty much about a year ago now, a year ago to the month. And you are somebody who every time I have a conversation with you, blows my mind. Just because of all the work you've done on yourself and all the things you've learned. And I kind of see you as like an older brother. So I'm excited to have you on today. And there's a few people that I've told about you in my life. And when this podcast gets released, I'm going to send it straight to them like, hey, it's time to listen to Jeff. So what are you learning lately, man? What do you want to share? How was your morning? Like, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great, buddy. And again, I just want to share a little gratitude for you. I love what you're doing. I love where you're taking this stuff. And I really appreciate you inviting me on here to just have a chat. It's always just nice to be in your space and be involved in your life. So thank you. Yeah, I got had a good sleep, got some morning sun as we do. And, finished a coaching call with a client. It's a very satisfying space for me to be in. And I get to sit here and riff with you for a while. So what's going on in my life right these days? Yeah, just working on the coaching business, the integration coaching. I'm running staff meeting at my training business today, so that's a little bit unique. Stepping in for my manager to actually talk about how to create experiences for people and memorable experiences. So maybe something we'll chat about today is sort of that embodied leadership. It's been very present in my life. Talking about things where, you were mentioning just before we started on here around the idea of acquired information. What do we do once we get this information? We read a book, or we know certain things. What are the next steps? So that's very much in my world right now. So
cool. Yeah, man. Like, for people that don't know, Jeff has been in the fitness industry for, I think, 20 years.
Actually, May 5th was 17 years.
Yeah.
That's with Innovative Fitness in the personal training, personal coaching business. Yeah.
Wow. So you're the owner of Innovative Fitness in Victoria. And have you owned an Innovative Fitness before that, or was it just starting out there?
No, it was just this is the first one. So I started with a company in 2005 after I got out of university. It was really, I fought it. It was quite funny, the story. It was a good buddy of mine I played basketball with in college. He was managing the Innovative Fitness in Kitsilano in 2005, when it was before they had any franchises. And there was West Vancouver and there was Kitsilano. And I'd come back from school, and in a previous life prior to going away to university, I painted. So it was sort of that college pro. It was actually a company called Alumni Painting. I'll give a shout out to Doug Woodford. He will never listen to this. It's good to honor the people in our lives. And so I knew Colin from that and basketball. And so anyways, when I came back from school, I was painting just to get some work and, meeting for beers as you do. And he was saying, you should come and apply. We're looking for coaches and stuff. Man, I don't want to personal train. I don't want to tell people what to do. If you want to exercise, go ahead and exercise. I don't want to hold people accountable to that. And he just kept on me. And finally, I ended up bringing my application into the Kitsilano location. And what I found is something that's it's carried with me to this day. It was the people I wanted to be around. When I missed about leaving basketball, I realized was the locker room, was just being around the guys, just the people that wanted to live life in a very similar way that I do. And I missed that. And I found when I showed up to the Kitsilano facility with my resume, every single trainer ran up and introduced themselves to me. And so, I was taught you stand up and shake someone's hand when they introduce you to you. So I was up, I was down, up, down. Oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, yeah. So, hey, oh, hey, how you doing? And I found it was just a bunch of ex-athletes that wanted to help people. So I started there in 2005, May 5th, 2005, as when I signed my paperwork. And it's been a wonderful experience ever since. And I was training there for, oh gosh, 5 years in Kitsilano. And then, it was in 2006, actually, the company started out with the franchises. So our White Rock location was the first one to open up. And then, I started looking at different franchise opportunities. And it was 2012 that I ended up opening up Victoria. So we've been 10 years over here. Well, it'll be 10 years in October.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Most businesses don't make it past the 5-year mark, and you're around here 10 years. What has been, I mean, it's a very hard question to answer, but like, what are maybe a couple of things that being a business owner for 10 years has really taught you about life and maybe about yourself?
Oh gosh. Owning a business or starting a business is tricky. The world of being an entrepreneur is tricky. It's taught me to take responsibility for things, which I can attribute back to playing sports, putting your hand up, owning things, owning your part in any relationship that you're in. That's been a big one that's carried with me. When you own a business and you hire employees, they're going to go and do things. And, at the end of the day, they're following your lead, like they're following the culture that you create. So really, it's taught me to surround myself with good people. And by good, I mean of like mind, that take responsibility for their actions, that want to learn, they want to grow. That was one of my favorite things about starting a business, was that I got to sort of pick the people I spent my time around. And that's a big deal for me. That's the people we spend our time around is sort of the people that influence us. They lift us up. It's our community. So I learned a lot about how community is very important in my life. And I got to learn how to create that. At the time, I didn't really know I was doing that, but you fast forward 10 years, I realized that's exactly what I was doing. I was also really focused on doing something that came from my heart. So it was something I cared about. I wanted to help people. I love the idea of teaching. So coaching is just a form of teaching. And I've learned that I've just expanded on that and gone deeper in the realm of teaching. So what I learned after about 5 years is that it wasn't just about building a successful business. It was a vessel for me to teach things that I cared about. Because as you know, when we teach things, it's the highest form of reinforcement. Yes. So as I'm talking to you or teaching you anything, I'm really just talking back to myself and reinforcing that which I believe to be true about any given topic we're discussing. Yep. So it anchored that into my life, and it also helped me when I became a father. I've got a soon to be 5-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. And, when we're parents, we're constantly teaching, and, it's what is teaching? It's not always just lecturing. It's about being an example. So for our business in the health and wellness, you got to walk the walk, right? You can't just be out there with people, working with them on their exercises or helping them get motivated with their nutrition or anything. You have to be that one that's energetically embodying that experience, and which translates to being a father. So it was a nice kind of pairing. So those are some of the big ones that I've taken away from my 10 years of owning a business.
Because it would have, I can definitely say that when I was a personal trainer, I was like parenting people. I felt that kind of had some crazy experiences. I was a personal trainer at Good Life, and that's how I met Marcus. And Marcus, our good friend, ended up moving to Victoria, ended up being an employee at Innovative Fitness, where you own. So that's how the weaves of life have connected Jeff and I, is through our good friend Marcus. And I remember when I worked with Marcus, I worked at Good Life for a couple of years. I just remember people would be very vulnerable when they would ask you for advice. And I'm just like, I remember thinking, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist, but like, had one woman ask me if she should divorce her husband. And I was like, 10 more squats, like, like, holy shit, like, how the fuck do I supposed to answer that? Because she'd been telling me about it for 6 months. And she's like, what do you think? Should I leave him? Kids involved, like teenage kids. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But what I found is that it helped me lead people. It helped me. I did feel like a parent sometimes. And sometimes I was almost too involved in people's lives. And that was a lack of boundaries on my end. And I would have people text me at 9 p.m. at night about their problems. And it got pretty crazy sometimes. It actually started to affect my relationship with Lexi. She's like, why are these women that you train texting you at 10 p.m. at night? I'm like, fair enough. So just an example of how involved you can get in people's lives and how much you can make an impact in people's lives. And I'm sure that all these lessons helped you learn to be a better father than maybe you would have been if you hadn't have had any of those experiences. Maybe speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those ones where we learn, or I learned very quickly, that it wasn't about just what I said, it's about what I did. Right. So again, going back to that kind of embodied leadership sort of thing, I found right from being an example for teammates, we were all examples for each other. We were all sort of inspiring and supporting one another through this path, and sharing very similar conversations to what you're sharing right now, about people really divulging a lot of personal information. And at the time I was a 20-year-old kid, and I'm going like, holy cow, I'm not equipped to deal with this. I'm not, like you said, I'm not a counselor. I don't have a background in it. I tell you what to do with your relationship. So it was just about it was learning to listen, really just active listening was a big part of that, and being present with them. This is certainly didn't have a phone out on the training floor, and I certainly wasn't, distracted. I was there with my client, and I learned to listen. And I found that's been really helpful with my kids, is just taking the time. I'm taller. So for me, I think when we talk about kids, we're all a little bit taller. And so one of the practices I use with them is I always get down to their level to try to look them in the eye and just square up to them. I teach my kids, you're listening, you make eye contact, square your shoulders, and focus on what's coming out. I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh is the one that said, when what we're doing by listening is we're just giving people an opportunity to empty their heart. And so you're just being present while they empty their heart. And in that, how can we actively listen? So that's been a big one. What else has come from that that's related to parenting? Focusing on more what I do versus what I say. So if it's how I show up, right? Again, like getting down to their level and listening, that's actively doing something that to me isn't, it's telling them like, be present, focus, change your eyes. Like, I'm doing it. I'm modeling that behavior. So I'm trying to do that with our clients, and with our business, it's big about adventure travel. And, we're not trying to train people to have, perfectly sculpted abs or really defined shoulders or biceps. The idea in our business anyways, is to train your body to do the things you love to do. Right. Yep. So it comes down to, well, if you want to get back into mountain biking, or, let's use your example, you want to get back into, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you end up going to the gym. Well, there's probably some stability stuff you want to work on prior to starting to roll around on a mat with people who are trying to snap your limbs. So getting out as an individual and doing those things myself, and being an example out mountain biking. And, I remember getting back into that and running again. Like I played sports, I wasn't doing these singular activities. So I had to, again, act like a beginner. again, really helpful when you're thinking about parenting. Like your kids are learning things. They're learning how to throw and ride a bike. And for most of us, doing things that we don't think we're going to be good at, or we're actually not good at, it's a very vulnerable space to be in. And it just gets harder as we get older, to look at ourselves like a beginner. We don't want to be seen as incompetent. It's hard to be, we think about how we're going to be viewed when we're doing something new. So really practicing leaning into that vulnerability of walking into being a beginner. And that was something I learned through personal training and learning to mountain bike again and doing some of these endurance races. And, got stories upon stories of bonking and not training properly. And then obviously times where I did it well. And sort of that ebb and flow of the process is really helpful with kids. Kids are learning to ride a bike. Like I say, they're going to fall down and they're going to cry and they're not going to want to get back on their bike. And how can you compassionately encourage them to do that? And then when they do it, hey, you see, when you get back up, you can do this. It's sort of that just encouragement. And then having your kids see you do things and say, hey, dad's trying this for the first time. I'm probably not going to be good at it. Don't just do things you're going to be good at, accept the things that you might not be good at and use it as an opportunity to model vulnerability.
Just thinking that like most kids have that till they're maybe 18, 19. Obviously parents will do that for like their whole adult life, but sometimes like we don't have that when we're 37, 27, 48, when we want to maybe go start a business. We don't have that person to be like, hey man, like you can do this, like that fatherly, motherly kind of parental figure. And yeah, it kind of links into like, I remember, I don't know if you're open to talking about this, but I remember one of the most vulnerable things you've shared to me is when I think it was the birth of your son. I think it was the birth of your son. And what you were going through in your life at that time, and you didn't really have a guide to tell you, hey man, like this is what you should be doing, like, and you kind of had to begin all over again. And you told me like ever since that point in your life that how many years ago was that, like 5 or 6?
About 7.
7 years
Yes.
ago.
So yeah, I'll fill you in on that if you want to go down that rabbit hole. That's a dandy.
Because that's how we can really link into kind of where we are today and what you're doing with your life. I think that's where you told me it really kind of started for you, and you called it the dark night of the soul. So
that's right.
yeah.
Well, actually, that was the birth of my daughter. So my youngest. But it started with my son actually, and the whole journey with my relationship with my ex-wife, and what a wonderful teacher and influence she's been in my life in so many ways. So lots of rich topics. So yeah, happy to go there. So if I go back to call it 2015, my son was born in 2014. Everything went really, really smoothly with my ex-partner and I. But it was when she was going back to work, and she really loved her job, as most, she's really strong, capable. She's a wonderful mother, and very good. She's a physiotherapist and wonderful at it. Loved her job, but there was a lot of external pressure. Like a lot of her friends didn't go back to work after their year mat leave, so it was tricky for her, and it's also tricky for parents to get, so she was feeling a lot of pressure going back to work in 2015. So my son was a year old, and that's when things got really challenging in our relationship. So just what I was saying is I got taught by 2 parents who were very conservative in their approach to life to essentially get a job that you loved, and work for 30 years and retire. It's sort of like build the white picket fence, have a family, live in a good city, raise your kids. And, my education there kind of stopped in terms of what it was to live in this world. And so again, me being very much a people pleaser, I just wanted to show my parents I could do it. I was always doing that with coaches and things. So anyways, I did that. And, my wife and I at the time, Now, ex-wife, we worked really hard at that, but we neglected our relationship in the process. So that's where it got exposed through that stress of having a young child in 2015, and that was my son. So that started a roller coaster. At the same time, my parents, who had worked, for 30 years, retired very quickly. They moved very quickly as well. So they did two very big things at once. And then my mom's breast cancer came back at the same time. Their parents, so my grandfather and grandmother on both sides, or my grandmother on my mom's side and my grandfather on my dad's side, required a lot of support as well too. So that, through my parents, caused a lot of drinking, and they had late stage alcoholism flowed into their life with a lot of abuse and stuff between them. So that was going on at the same time. My marriage was getting exposed with small children, a new business.
Oh God.
Carry forward into 2016, and some of the drinking, without getting into too many of the details, became an issue, and we could no longer have our sons spend the night with my parents, which caused a huge rift between my parents and I in the summer of 2016. At that time, my ex and I were really, well, my wife at the time, we were in a really big up and down with our relationship. It'd be really, really good, and then it'd get really, really low, and really, really good, really, really low. And in that time, we were convinced we wanted to have a second child. I'm not sure if we thought it was going to save our marriage or whatever. I think we just always wanted to have that family. And we were sort of just, I remember us talking a lot about, having a young family is hard, and it is hard. And it's hard on a relationship. Anybody who's listening to this will know that. And there's certainly struggles and things to get through, and sleepless nights and financial stresses and all the things. So all that was playing into the fact, and then parents who were drinking and hurting themselves and weren't able to support us and that thing. So anyhow, we ended up trying to have a second child. And as it goes, stress in the body, all those things playing into it, it was very challenging for us to get pregnant with my daughter. And so it was an 11-month journey of a lot of stress. And again, anyone who's listening to this, men in general, I always want to say, talk about it. Please, there's a lot. And I know it's getting better, but that fight for fertility is a tricky one. And don't suffer in silence. Please reach out, talk. You'll be surprised at how many other men are going through that process. And it was a battle for my ex and I, my wife at the time. So anyways, that compiled onto the stress. We were going to counseling at the time as well too, to try to help. And we just had very different approaches to how to sort out our marriage. And again, a lot of our relationship got exposed. So now move into 2017, she's pregnant. We do. So right before we were about to start IVF and all those things, she got pregnant somehow, some way, kind of the 11th month, literally the 11th hour. It was wild. And so she's pregnant, got my son. He's 2 at the time. And so now we're going through that. And my daughter was born in June of 2017. And this is to the point where you started. So now we're caught up to that dark night of the soul. So being a people pleaser, and that stems a lot from the relationship with my mother. I was taught there's always a way to say things. There's always a way to say things to get what you need and want in this life. And it's just a form of manipulation. So again, if anyone else has gone through this, we can tailor our words, we can do all these things, and it's not wrong to be respectful, and it's not wrong to think about how you're saying something. But if it's with the intent to achieve what you want, then for me, it was about, well, maybe I'm going to leave out those details, or maybe I'm going to skew it and put emphasis on this because it'll sound better to get what I need here. So again, that was a big part of what I learned. so going through these struggles with my wife, and through the pregnancies, going through the struggles with my parents and their drinking, having a new business, I was breaking down. I was getting to the point where I didn't have the ability to, I couldn't create this life that I thought I could create by presenting and pleasing the way I always had. And it got to a situation where I was actually in a counseling appointment, and this is always tricky for me to share. It was on June 7th. I was in a counseling appointment, and I remember talking to my counselor about how I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't stay in this marriage. It's just not healthy for me. I can't have my sons see me this way in a relationship. We're just fighting too much. We can't get on the same page. We have a different way of seeing the world. And that's all it was for us. It was just two different people that had different ways of dealing with their stress. So I come out of that counseling appointment to about 10 phone calls from my wife. Her water had broken. Now, we had a planned C-section for June 8th at 9:30 in the morning. Well, my daughter decided she wanted to come early. So June 7th at around 4:00 in the afternoon, my wife's water broke. So I'm coming out of that counseling appointment, declaring this to my counselor, going like, oh my God, I got to go and get my wife to the hospital. I fly home, all this on my mind and in my heart. We get to the hospital, we do the thing. She has an emergency C-section. My daughter's born around 3 a.m. On the 8th. And because it was a C-section, we got to spend some time in the hospital, and I was doing the thing, and we were going through the thing, and, you know, all that process went well. But we're in our private room, which was great. And, you know, this was that dark night of the soul on June 11th. My daughter was 3 days old. I was really distant from my wife. I was sort of sitting in the little bed that they have beside, and I was just very in my thoughts. And she kept getting after me about what was going on and why I wasn't speaking and why I was so distant. And I said, you know, just not open to talking about it right now. Can we wait till we get home? And she just was insistent. I think she felt uncomfortable. So she kept pushing me. And finally I snapped. It was the first time in my life that I hadn't planned what I was going to say. I hadn't tried to say it in a good way. It just came out. And terrible timing. It was the worst timing. My daughter's 3 days old. And I just told her, I said, I can't be married to you anymore. Like, I want a divorce. And there was more to that in the conversation, but essentially that exploded things. And I ended up sleeping in the car in the parking lot of the hospital that night. And, you know, I remember being really lost and really scared. And I ended up coming back up to the room, and that sort of started this whole unraveling process of being really lost and really, I cracked. And through that process, so fast forward a little bit, over the next 3 months, I ended up having 2 panic attacks at work. Found it was the time where I felt most alone in my life. And these are panic attacks at 12:00 in the afternoon, crying in my office uncontrollably, couldn't breathe, laying on the floor. You know, again, the typical guy, didn't know how to ask for help, didn't know who to ask. And I'll say, anybody who's listened to this, who's gone through that, your focus just gets so narrow. And it feels like the world's closing in on you. Thankfully, at the time, I had a client, a good friend of mine, who was working with some psychedelics. And I had very little knowledge of these. And he just happened to walk by my office one day and saw, I guess, that I was struggling or something. And he came in and just started chatting with me. And he was working out of a retreat center in Nelson, he was going to these retreats to deal with some personal stuff in his life. And he just started to talk to me about it and said, have you ever considered this? I said, hell no. Like, that ain't my world. I mean, I did a few mushrooms in college just for fun and stuff, and smoked a bit of weed, but I had never done anything like what he was talking about. And I hadn't even heard of the substance that he was referring to, which was iboga. he gave me a Joe Rogan podcast to listen to, and I listened to that, and I did a
Gateway drug, Joe Rogan.
right. And I did a little bit of research, and essentially I was so desperate. I was going to counseling. I was trying a whole bunch of things, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And my wife at the time, and we were going to get a divorce, and she ended up taking the kids to Montreal, where she's from, to see her family. And I ended up in September of 2017, driving up to over to Nelson, BC, and to this retreat center, and met my friend there. And I sat with Iboga for the first time, and it absolutely changed my life. Actually, it shattered me. And, I'll throw a caveat in here. Like, I'm not recommending anybody go do psychedelics. I'm not recommending this as a treatment plan. It's, Iboga of all things is a level 3 medicine. And if I had known that at the time, I wouldn't have taken this as my first approach. It's, 5-MeO, DMT, and Iboga are the 2 level 3 medicines, and they're not introductory medicines for medical work. So if anyone's listening to this that thinks this is a path for them, there's better ways. And as you and I both know, we've had experience in that in better ways. Yes. So just to put that out there, this was just sort of my path. It was a lack of knowing. It was what I needed, though. So I had an experience where I was completely shattered, and it was like, I think, a 15 or 18-hour experience with a lot of purging and a lot of scary stuff that showed up. I hadn't been taught how to be in those experiences. Like, we've been taught how to surrender, let go, have some sort of practices to deal with those challenging things that can come up in that space. And the Iboga is very dark, so it pulls you inward. It's a very long experience. So how you classify medicines from level 1, 2, and 3 is sort of the intensity, and then the duration of the intensity of the medicine. So again, 5-MeO DMT is a very short duration, but it's very intense, like extremely intense. And Iboga is very physically intense, and the duration is very long. So it's kind of the big daddy of it all. So yeah, that launched me into a space of feeling more forgiveness, more compassion, more self-love, more understanding that we're all going through an experience. And this is in the Iboga phase. This is the discovery day. So you do Iboga, and then they call it your discovery day, where you're literally coming back online. And I think I was just really grateful to be back in my body. And, it was a lot of gratitude for not being stuck in that very hellish space.
Iboga land. Imagine being stuck there.
So, that launched me into a space where I called my wife in Montreal, and I said, I think we can fix this. I think we can get through this. And she was really hesitant, and but ultimately agreed. And when she got back from Montreal, we found a new counselor, and we really leaned into this for the next 2 years, around healing in a different way. And it was what we needed. It was actually, the fast forward is we still ended up separating, but we put a proper effort into healing and seeing what we could do. Are you okay with me keeping going on this?
Oh, you go for it, man. People want to listen to this kind of stuff because it's the real stuff. It's the vulnerable stuff that people don't talk about, and it's real.
Yeah, so it was a definite state of desperation, that dark night of the soul, where I didn't have anywhere else to go, and it turned me around, and we used the therapy, we brought back into it. And when I finished Iboga, I was like, man, I don't ever need to do psychedelics again. I'm good. Like, I'm healed. I'm fixed, which was very naive of me. It was just the beginning of my journey. Mm-hmm. But it was probably a good year of just doing therapy and integrating what came up, prior to me going back and working with different medicines after that. But so then that was a situation where I ended up getting introduced to some of my wonderful teachers to this day. And I continued working with psychedelics in the medicinal form in treatment centers because it was really helpful for me. And so I will also throw out something I think is really important for people to hear, especially when they're in relationships. My wife at the time was not comfortable with that. And I've got full respect for anybody who is not comfortable taking substances that may not agree with them. And I always say, consult physicians, consult doctors before you do any of this sort of stuff. Iboga, especially because there is actually one heart condition. It's the only psychedelic that can actually kill you if you do have a specific heart condition that they can test for. So if you are thinking about going to do Iboga, you got to go get blood tests. You got to go get checked for this heart condition, and find a treatment center that has EMTs on site. They should be checking your blood pressure. They should be having people available for support there. So just to throw that in, but also going back to the relationship thing, making sure that there's a conversation between you and your partner that you're going to be using these tools because they accelerate things. And so if you're going along like this and you're sort of coming back in and out, you can accelerate your awareness and your growth in a different way than your partner. And it can actually pull you apart if they're not using the substances as well. That's not to pressure them to do it, because again, another caveat here is you cannot talk somebody into doing this stuff. That you have to feel called to it. It has to be a very personal decision. Do your own research, walk in there with your own intention. So I don't know if you want to jump in and add anything there.
Yeah, it's so a question I wanted to ask you is that you hear the word medicine a lot.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that, I was like, are they just pantomiming? Are they just trying to call it a medicine when it's technically a drug? Technically, a lot of them are still illegal. There's a real talk about psychedelics lately for the first time since the 60s, because they're really discovering some amazing things. And for people that have never done anything like that or have no idea about the context of the word medicine, can you maybe try to explain that to somebody who, in a layman's way?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So when we think about it, it's any medicine at a specific dose can turn into a poison, right? Mm-hmm. So what, again, the drug culture, and this was sort of brought in the 60s, is this idea that kids are doing drugs, and they are. Drugs is not a wrong classification, but you can also then call Tylenol and Advil and all the cancer medicine that people take, those are all drugs too.
Coffee, alcohol
can be a drug. So, but alcohol can also heal wounds, right? So we always think about intentionality. So when we're using these substances to heal, to actually get to know ourselves more deeply, or go to some places in our subconscious that maybe talk therapy hasn't been able to help, or we've got some trauma blocks or other things that are there. Yeah, now calling it a medicine is just showing respect for the substance we're using with the intention to heal.
That's beautifully worded. That's like, I've tried to explain it to people before, and what you said, it's all about the intention. If you're doing say you're doing psilocybin mushrooms, say you're doing LSD, say you're doing any of these things to run away, to get high, that is a drug. If you're doing it to look internally and really work on yourself, that is a medicine. I love that. It's sometimes I feel uncomfortable talking about this kind of stuff around people that have never done it, because they will judge you. They're like, oh, you're just gonna go get high, huh? You're gonna go get fucked up. It's like, yeah. No, man. I've done that a lot. I've done that with different things. I did that a lot with MDMA in my early 20s, ecstasy, like pressed pills. I did it with mushrooms. I would see pretty colors and get high, but it's all about the way that you use these things. And you have to really, like, I hear stories about friends, people I work with, people I know, they're like, yeah, man, I did some mushrooms on the weekend. And I used to be like, oh, that's cool, that's fun. Now I almost feel like an uneasy feeling. I'm like, be careful. Like, be careful of, it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings, the dwarves in Moria, they delved too deep and they released this thing called the Balrog, which was locked deep in the mines of this place called Khazad-dûm. And they released it, and they didn't mean to release it. I kind of see psychedelics in the same way. If you accidentally do too much and you're at a party or a nightclub or a music festival, your Balrog might come out, your demons might come out, and you can't put them back in at that time. And you got to be careful. So just want to kind of say that to people that maybe think it's cool, or I've had people be like, hey man, we should do some mushrooms together, because they know that I've done some psychedelic work. And I'm like, no. I have a friend who has had some sexual abuse when he was younger, and he expressed some interest of wanting to do them with me. And I can't do that with him because I'm not qualified, and I don't. If his Balrog come out, if his demons come out and there's some stuff that comes up, he's a big dude. He's like 6'3", 6'4", 260 pounds. And if he gets angry or something goes wrong, no thanks. So people who are listening to this, you should have a fear. You should have not an irrational fear. It's more of a respect for anything like this, because it's not a game. I treated them like a game till a year ago. I used to do them all the time for fun, like mostly mushrooms, because it's fun. Don't get me wrong, it's fun. You have a beautiful sunny day and you go down by a river or a beach and you maybe have 1 or 2 grams and it's amazing. It's an amazing time. But I'm not saying that that's not okay to do that. What I'm saying is that you got to be careful, very, very careful.
A healthy respect is what I'm hearing you say. Absolutely. And I would second that. I've had a lot of wonderful, fun experiences taking low dose mushrooms in university with friends. And, you call it lucky in the sense that, nothing really catastrophic happened, or I didn't go into any dark places. We think of that with alcohol too, right? A lot of us go through our adolescence, we misuse alcohol because it puts you into an altered state. It lowers your inhibitions, and it can be a lot of fun. And there's nothing wrong with having fun or taking these substances to have a good time. It comes with some risk. And that's, I think, what I'm hearing you say is that just be mindful of those risks. And one of the things that gets talked about a lot with psychedelic use is set and setting. And, the set is your mindset. What mindset do you have going into the experience or using these substances? And if your mind's like, if you just had a really triggering experience in your life, or there's something going on inside of you, there's going to be a subconscious mindset and a conscious mindset that you're taking in that these substances could potentially expose and bring out. And then we think about the setting. That's the environment we're doing it in, right? The people that we're around. And these medicines, one of the things they do is they increase your level of sensitivity to your external environment and your internal environment. So again, if you're at a party and maybe you're in a place where you're not really feeling safe, or for any number of reasons, and you take too much, like you said, that setting can be the thing that sets you off. And it can be very hard, or can be very destabilizing, trying to recover from that experience, right? And again, like these are all, it's a healthy respect for what can happen. And again, I have, it's not something that I really say, hey, go be comfortable with this because it works for everybody. These are not for everybody. This tool is not for everyone. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not for everyone, right? Like if you've had a number of knee replacements or knee surgeries, don't go do that sport. Like it's not going to be good for you in a lot of regards, right? So yeah, I think this is just, it's to your point. I love the opportunity to talk about this stuff. It's been a wonderful tool in my life. I feel I've also had the gift of wonderful teachers and people that helped me respect these very, very sacred plants and fungi and substances that can be used in a really powerful way with the right intention. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's certainly taken us on a journey together. It's how we connected. And I think for a lot of people, if the tool works and you feel called, there's ways to research these sorts of podcasts. Hearing people talk about their experiences, it can be very beneficial. And there's, again, a lot more stuff. MAPS is a great resource for people to look into this. Johns Hopkins is a great place for people to research some of the studies that are out there, and the positive effects of these sort of things. You got the Fireside Project, which I always like to throw out there. If people, are having, they are playing around with these medicines, the Fireside Project, it's a helpline you can call if you've taken too much. So I don't know if you do show notes or anything like that, but there's a number that I can get you. I don't have it on hand, but
we'll have it included for sure.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, and again, just reiterating the intentionality. So to our point, we met in circle. Like we sit in a men's group together, and it's a sacred space where we use these medicines to open up a lot of what's in our internal space, support each other as we go through our healing and what's coming out. And we practice our listening skills. We practice talking and being vulnerable, and sharing in that sacred space that these tools, we like to call them tools, can amplify. Right?
Yeah. I think that one of the most powerful tools that I've ever experienced, which is not a psychedelic, is breathing properly. Breath work and what it can do, it has psychedelic effects. It's crazy what it can do. Like, you can see things, you can feel things, you can release trauma in your body. Again, they're all tools. It's just like, is one tool the best way to do something? Might be the best way for one person, but it might not be the best way for another person.
That's right.
You look at MMA, there's many ways to win a fight. You could knock somebody out. You could submit them with a heel hook. You could submit them with a triangle. There's many ways to get the desired result. So I love what Jeff is saying, that if it's something that you're cold to and you're curious about, then my opinion would be to look into different retreats, different centers, different professional places that do these things. So you have the right set and setting. And I wouldn't go just do it on your own. I would not do that. You need a guide. If it's almost like a language, it's like, you could try and learn Spanish on your own. You could probably learn it and learn the language, but you really learn the nuances and the real language by spending time with somebody who speaks Spanish. Like, you really learn, like, you want to kind of pause after you say this, or you want to weave this into this word, and this word doesn't really go with that word. And you're like, okay, cool. And it could really help you. So yeah, it kind of brings me to what you're doing now. Obviously that was 2017. You started you did a BOGA, which you wouldn't recommend. It's a level 3 medicine, but it's your story. And then you've obviously done different medicines between now and then. And I wanted to ask you, because this is it's like a buzz thing right now, is ayahuasca. People are like, have you done it? This guy I know, he's a really cool guy. He's an MMA world champion, and I ran into him the other day. He actually happens to be from Brazil. And we were talking about this kind of stuff, and he looks at me, he's like, have you done ayahuasca? I was like, no. He's like, buddy, I've done it like 50 times. I'm from Brazil. And he was talking to me about it. And he was like, he did it in his early 20s, and it's part of who he is today and how it influenced him. And he's a multi-time world champion, like on a very big stage. I'm not going to mention his name, doesn't matter, but it's I was like, cool. And he was talking about his relationship with that. So maybe talk about that, because people always ask about it, people always talk about it. I don't know why it's this big buzz thing right now. Maybe you could tell me why, or maybe what's your perspective on it?
Absolutely. Very sacred medicine. I think the reason it gets talked about so much, I mean, you get Will Smith's book that comes out where he talks about it there. It tends to be, comes on more the mainstream, like you say, there's some very influential people that are talking about their experience with it. You can fly down to the Amazon and you go down to Peru and these places, and you can sit in these retreat centers, and there's some very good ones. I can throw a plug out because one of my guides is connected there, but the Temple of the Way of Light down in Peru is a great center. Solterra Healing Center down in Costa Rica. Those are two reputable places. And maybe it's an opportunity just to talk about how to know the person you're working with is going to provide a safe experience and a meaningful experience for you. Because what I've found, and even our local guides here talk about having to help people heal from really negative experiences. They're typically around ayahuasca, because people come back from these experiences in the jungle and they all of a sudden think that they can, be healers as well too. And so again, just one thing, if you run into anybody in this space that calls themselves a healer, that calls themselves a shaman, that calls himself a guru, run away. Just get out of Dodge. That is not a person you want to work with, because the number one thing you want to remember, the medicines don't heal you. We do the healing. You heal you. Okay, that's number one. So if you are using a substance that you think is going to fix you, you don't have the right set walking in. It's not going to work out well for you.
Yep.
You have everything inside of you to heal you. Always remember that. These substances just can allow access to those spaces. And based on the different, molecules in them, like DMT is the one that's in ayahuasca. They got to mix the chacruna plant and the ayahuasca vine, and they do that in a certain way, and that helps unlock the DMT that you ingest. And so talking about ayahuasca, it took me a long time. Like I only sat with ayahuasca for the first time last year. And so I'd been on my journey with medicine work for quite some time before getting to sit with, she's often referred to as grandmother medicine. I like that terminology because she is definitely a very wise teacher. But finding the correct facilitator. So, there's places in British Columbia here where you can find people cooking this up in tents and offering experiences. And again, if they don't have a safe place for you to sleep and stay overnight, not a good space. If they're calling some of themselves the healers, or if they're putting any labels on themselves, not probably a very good person you'd want to work with.
No.
So again, with that, there's a lot of research and some great books that I'll again get to you that you can throw in the show notes for people to read. And then there's actually even a documentary. The name is slipped my mind right now. So again, I'll get that to you as well, so people can, watch this stuff, read about it, and then sort of look into some of these more reputable healing centers that could help facilitate a positive experience. And then the kicker with any of this stuff, ayahuasca, iboga, using psilocybin, MDMA, any of these sort of things, the key is that the medicine isn't going to fix you. It's only going to show you your truth. So it's going to show you what's true. And what you do with that is going to determine whether or not it was just an experience, a peak experience, an experience or a memory to get high, or it's actually going to be integrated into your life. And so that's a big part of where I've really found from my coaching practice is I got really interested in the integration aspect of this work. So the preparation and integration is where I've moved my coaching business. So I've got a business now called Full Spectrum Integration. And that's bringing forward the work of Dr. Dan Engel, who's a wonderful teacher of mine. And he's done a lot of research in this area for a number of years. And so bringing his work forward around the preparation and integration is the path of my coaching now. And so I do run a coaching business where I support people on the front and back side of these experiences to ensure that they glean as much out of the experience as possible, and they can put it into practical application of their life. So again, we can talk about ayahuasca. Again, we can talk about any medicines. It's good. They're all going to open you up in different ways. and different medicines are going to work well for different people. I find some of these bigger medicines like ayahuasca, iboga, if you've had a bit of a journey up to that using psilocybin, low dose LSD, which is just a derivative of a fungi as well too. Those are experiences, again, done in a therapeutic guided setting, can be a nice walk up to preparing for some of these, we'll call it larger experiences that can potentially occur with these medicines. So with that,
let's talk about integration, because I mean, like you said, it's not, a lot of people think that it's going to go fix them. Like, if I go down to Peru and do ayahuasca, my life's going to be fixed. It's like, no, it's your job to fix your life. If you feel like it's broken, then none of those experiences even matter without integration. I haven't been the best at integration in the past. I didn't really know how to do it. And that's another thing. It's like, people probably don't know the amount of people that I've spoke to that have done mushrooms or done something like that, and it's drastically changed their life. And they talk about it as one of the most amazing experiences of their life. And maybe when they were 20 and they're in their 50s now, and like, yeah, I did LSD and I saw things and I felt things and I went down this path and now I'm here, and it's because of that. And it's amazing, but it's just like, we don't know, because it's such a new industry almost. It's like there's no rule book on how to integrate these experiences. So maybe maybe talk about that, like how important it really is to integrate, and what called you to go into this coaching and really start this.
Yeah, thank you. It's well, to me, I found that, again, I had a great experiences with coaches. So I had Dr. Dan Engel as an integration coach. He was a mentor of mine at the time, and I was doing some paid coaching with him. And so he was able to help me with this process and talk to me about this and use his call it protocol that I'm now working to bring forward. So I saw how much more I got with that after the experience, because I didn't have that after my iboga experience, and I still got a lot out of it. I just now know I could have gotten more if somebody was guiding me with certain questions to think about what was coming up in a specific way. So with that, it was just my own personal experience. I had that, shown to me. And so I felt like this was an opportunity for me to be able to bring that forward for somebody else. I look at it like, I'll say Dr. Dan, one of his first things he says after going through one of these experiences is hold the gold, right? We have an internal experience or something that comes up using these medicines for a good, 5 to 7 days. Try not to talk about it. Like, you're going to feel really called to, like, even maybe go shout from the rooftops, everybody should go do this. Oh my God, it changed my life. And, you're going to try and convince your partner or your mom, your dad, or your best friends to come and do this. Don't do that.
Like the recently saved Christian.
That's right. And, you're trying to preach it. And again, I'll use one of Dr. Dan's favorite sayings. It's like, the hold the gold, but it's, give me a second. It's preach. It's no, man, I'm botching this. You can cut this part out because he ends up, if it comes back to me, I'll end up sharing it, because it's preach the gospel always. Oh yeah, that's what it is. It's preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. All right. So it's like, you don't need to be telling everybody about your experience. You can simply just live your life in that way that the medicines have helped you feel that you can change. Again, I want to jump back on something you said, because it is something that we think about, is we think we're broken. If something's wrong with us, we think we're broken and we need to be fixed. Nobody's broken. Nobody needs fixing. It's this, part of the great human sickness of not feeling good enough, right? We want to remember that it's just about, we're remembering who we are. Okay. So the medicines are going to show us stuff. They're going to show us our truth. And through that first week, we just want to be with what that was, whether it was uncomfortable, whether it was, really impactful. So use voice recordings, write notes, those sorts of things in that first 5 to 7 days. Because if you go and share, one of the things we do as humans is we want to relate. So if you share with a big experience, you had a big experience with me, I'm trying to get on your level. Well, one thing you'll notice with these substances is very hard to get on somebody's level that has experienced some of these things. You'll realize words suck very quickly when you're trying to describe feelings. Like just, this might be a little out there, but try to describe with words how much you love your children. Try to describe with words the most amazing orgasm you've ever had. I mean, just start there.
Because it's biologically, because the emotional limbic brain, the deep brain, doesn't have any language center. Only the prefrontal cortex has language center. So therefore, when the limbic brain tries to communicate with the newer prefrontal cortex, you can't, there's no words.
No. So in that, like you trying to describe to me any of those things, a medicine experience, how much you love somebody or whatever, that's a feeling. I can't ever feel what you feel. But what we do as humans is we try to do that, to relate. So again, I'm going to project onto you what I think your experience was, and that may color what you think your experience was.
Oh, I've experienced that big time. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel good. The person's like, are you sure it wasn't this? And I'm like, no. How do you know what you experienced? How do you know that that's the message on? It's like, because I fucking know. It's like, I know it to be true because the deep truth within me. So stop trying to project onto me. And I remember getting kind of angry at this person. I was like, well, it's my fault not holding the gold and not sitting with it and be like, okay,
that's yours.
Yeah.
We hold that as your experience, your truth.
Yeah.
So as we go through that experience, that's called our receiving phase. And it's the first of 6 phases that we take people through in the integration coaching. And we receive on our own to just be with whatever came up. And that can start during the medicine experience and carries for about 7 days after. Okay, so hold the gold. And then after the receiving phase, we move into the processing phase. And that's when you start to look at, like, what are some of the themes that came up in your experience? What are, what did it show you? And then what does that mean for your life? Right? Like, how did those things connect to your life now? And then you might have like a therapist or a coach or a really close friend or someone in your men's circle, a guide that might offer some time for you to start to talk about that a little bit. Okay. And you might be referring your notes. Another good thing to think about in the processing phase is if you had the opportunity to record anything. So in some experiences, some guides will allow you to record, and that can be a very effective use for psilocybin, is the blindfold, the music, then having a recording device that you can then speak just the things that come up into the recording device. And then what we do in that processing phase is there's actually, you transcribe what came from that experience. That can be a really helpful way to bring back what was coming up for you. And again, also during the experience, it can be very helpful because we don't hold on to things. This thought about my friends or my kids or something really meaningful. We try to remember it, as opposed to just speaking it and letting it go and then moving to the next thing, right? So that can be a really helpful tool in the processing phase. After we've processed, we move into the action phase. So now we're going to start thinking about commitments. What am I committing to? Okay, I commit to some new behaviors. I commit to some new habits. I'm going to commit to, setting some boundaries. I'm going to commit to, could be anything, right? So now we're thinking about practical application. And from the action phase, so this is week 3, now we're moving into the releasing phase. Okay. And that releasing phase is where, well, if we want to have new commitments and actions come through, to have anything new come into our life, it's really helpful to let old things go. So now in the releasing phase, which tends to be the hardest for people, about 4 weeks post-experience, I'm going to start going like, what are some of the things that no longer serve me? Are there relationships or people that I'm hanging around that just aren't good for me? Are there behaviors or habits that I'm involved in that aren't serving like what I know to be true for myself? right? Because part of the action, the commitments, is moving yourself more into alignment. And when we think about alignment, you want to think thoughts, words, and actions. How similar are your thoughts that translate to your words, translate to your actions? The more similar those are, the more in alignment you are with your life. The more alignment you are with your life, you're just going to find a lot more fulfillment and ease in the process. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It just means there's going to be a little bit more centeredness in how you go through things, and you're going to be less confused. So as we go through the releasing phase, then we move to the practices phase. So we've got actions and we've got releasing. Now we're going, okay, what practices are going to anchor that which we know to be true? You might start a meditation practice. You might start coaching. You might start an exercise regime. You might start changing eating habits. You could have some other rituals, a morning ritual, an evening ritual. I know for you, one was cacao. You came out of one experience and you're like, cacao is my new morning thing. And I loved hearing you talk about that. Those are things that can be practices, ways of speaking to our partners, time and connection. Those can be practices. So now we're taking this that's come up and going like, oh, how is this going to stay in our life? And then from practices, we move to the final phase, which is mastery. And we like to pull this over about a 2-month period of time, and I'll talk about that at the end. But the mastery phase, and really when we think about what mastery is we realize that we're just looking at the same things we've always had in our life. We're just seeing them differently. So mastery is about improved perception. And improved perception is just more complete, and I shouldn't say more complete, it's more specialized pattern recognition. I'm a sports guy. Think about quarterbacks. Ball gets snapped, whole bunch of things are happening. Quarterbacks with high IQ can see things in a very short period of time and make decisions very quickly based on the mastery of being in that role. They can just recognize patterns faster. So again, mastery could be looking at nature differently. You now go for a walk and you feel the wind on your skin. You see the leaves on the trees. You see things with a little more specificity. Could be in a relationship. You're seeing more pattern recognitions or deeper pattern recognitions in your relationships, the way you talk to your partner, your friends, okay? How you engage in your work, right? Pattern recognition is mastery, okay? And that's what we can always improve on. And the faster we see these different pattern recognitions, then we can make different choices based on that. Okay. And I'll coin Dr. Dan, one of my favorite sayings he says is, love is our blueprint, choice is our power, and life is our school. Okay. Mm-hmm. So again, when I talk about this, so the receiving phase, the processing phase, the action phase, the releasing phase, the practices phase, and then the mastery phase, we pull that over a 2-month period of time. And the reason that we do that is one of the things we're finding with people using medicine or these psychedelics is, how do you know when to use them? How do you know when to go back, right? So if we don't go through a proper integration process, oftentimes what you'll find is after about a month or two, that high of that, oh my gosh, this was a life-changing experience, life starts to kick back in. You get bombarded with all sorts of stuff that happens, and it can distract you from that feeling that you had, those realizations that came up. And if you haven't anchored in how they're going to sit with your life now, you can just get lost in the shuffle again. And then you talk about it like it was a memory. Oh, that time I did ayahuasca, that time I did mushrooms, it was really great, but it didn't actually stick with your life because it wasn't applied, right? Or there wasn't a way to apply it or a conscious way to apply it. So then at that 2-month marker, now we should go, okay, now sit with everything you worked on for a month. At the end of that month, now start to think, hey, do you feel like, going back into medicine could uncover something a little more deeply, right? If it doesn't, if you're still working on the things that came up, then just keep working on those, right? It's a way to determine how to use these medicines or these tools in what fashion, right? We don't always train for marathons. We don't always just pound ourselves and try to do, 5 or 10 or 12 marathons a year. The idea in the human body, physiologically speaking, is we can peak 2 times a year. right? Like get peak performance out of ourselves over a 6-month span, right? You like to talk about UFC. They time their fights very appropriately based on those peaks,
Yeah.
right? So
Very
that's
interesting.
essentially the coaching that, from an integration perspective that we're bringing forward with full spectrum integration. And that's Dr. Dan's teachings. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to go through that myself. And I just feel like there's so many people getting unlocked with these wonderful medicines that if they really want to get the most out of it, I can use my coaching to support that. So that's my give back.
Wow. And what a gift it is, man. Wow. We've been talking for almost an hour and a half. It's a long time. I gotta head to work, even though I don't want to head to work right now. I want to continue this conversation. I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, buddy.
But what are some closing thoughts that you want to share? You can find, I don't know how people want to connect with you. How, if somebody wanted to connect with you, how would you like them to connect with you, through Instagram, or how would somebody want to connect with you?
Yeah, well, full spectrum integration is going to be launching in June. So fullspectrumintegration.com/updates will be a great way. That'll be live. I think right now, actually, so you can check that out. And then eventually in June, fullspectrumintegration.com will be a lot of support material on these sort of topics, preparation, integration protocols. You could access myself for coaching off of that site. Jeff Dallin 8@gmail.com is an easy one too, just to get a hold of me right now. But those will be changing as that platform becomes more active. Yeah, no other thoughts, man. I just want to say thanks for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about this. It's a gap in this space right now, is the integration coaching, and really helping these medicines come forward in a good way is putting them to good use, and helping support people who really want to use them for that healing purpose. So thanks for the opportunity to be able to talk about that and to be able to share my experience and how I got into this. I really thank you, man.
No, I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. And I think this one's going to be a good one. This is an episode that a lot of people around me, they've probably wanted to have this conversation or hear this kind of conversation, but I just have chosen not to really go and have this conversation with them, because they would do what you said. They might project their preconceived notions onto me, and then it wouldn't be a conversation. It could turn into something different. What's cool about this platform we're on is you have to listen. You can listen to Jeff, and you have to listen to what he says and the way that he communicates and his mindset around these things, and really understand what it is that we're talking about. And it might take some time, especially if you have some thoughts or some deep held beliefs about certain substances or things like that. Like it really can challenge those beliefs, especially if they come from your parents or society or whatever. But I think it's 2022. We're discovering some really cool things. And I believe that over the next 10 years, it's going to be crazy where people can be. And the real pandemic, which is anxiety and fear and all these kind of things that grip people's lives, it doesn't have to be reality. And there's many ways to go about it. And I love that, especially within men. That's an entire podcast you do just about men. Like, holy shit. That's why we gather in men's groups, and that's why we do this, and that's why it's such a sacred space. And when people I know maybe make fun of that or tease it, I'm still working on it. I get very deeply angry sometimes, because I can't just be like, hey, here it is. Here's what it is. And I can just like, they can experience it for 10 seconds. And yeah, so that's my final thoughts, man. I appreciate you. I love you very much. You're a very valued man that I have in my life. And yeah, man, this is a great episode. So I just want to say thank you once again. And go follow this guy. Go listen to what he has to say. Go on his website. Just follow his journey, because I know it's going to be crazy over the next couple of years. So thanks, Jeff.
Lots of love, brother. Appreciate you.
All right.